Good morning and welcome to ASL's HR in 10.
That's 10.
I'm Jason Perry
And I'm Kimberly Bradshaw.
and we get together on a Thursday morning live on this YouTube feed to share with you what's going on in the world of employment and HR. And Kimberly's chuckling already.
Well, there's never a dull moment, is there? I should actually just say sorry if I cough because I'm recovering from a cough.
It's
But yeah, it's crazy at the moment.
indeed.
Again,
uh, we live in interesting times, I think, is the way. I would normally expect what I call not a budget to kind of have such important HR and employment consequences, Kimberly.
I know. I mean, I think the big one is the national insurance changes, isn't it? It's which have been reversed to previous levels.
Yes, from the 6th of November. Now, in some senses, it's kind of a non-story to employers because any modern payroll system will do this automatically. Gone are the days where you had to make complex calculations and write out your pay slips or even run software updates.
I remember
Because
those days.
absolutely. But for almost all employers, they will find it just works on the right day and the calculations will be adjusted.
Yeah.
The bit that really caught my interest, and I keep reading this with amusement, is the fact that employers were, first of all, required to, and then encouraged to, put a note on payslips about the increase to declare that it was contributing to the health and social care levy, weren't they?
Yes, which I don't think ever took off really. I don't know of anyone that put it on, do you?
Do you know, I know of one employer that
Wow.
actually was aware of it and it happened, and it was literally because their payroll provider did it for them.
Mm.
But I've talked to numerous HR people. I'm yet to find one who knew about it or had put it in place. So the official advice is make sure you remove the note. But I just have a sneak suspicion you probably didn't put the note on your payslip in the first place.
Yeah, and to be honest, telling people to put things on a payslip is people don't read those properly. They just look at the figures. If you
Mm.
want to send a message, do it another way, using
Yes.
employee engagement,
Oh,
perhaps.
I knew there would be an employee engagement plug there. Um, the, the kind of bits of this that do get my interest and employers ought to be watching out for, particularly the smaller employers, is the, what's the word, employment allowance, that's the
Yeah.
word. And there is this national insurance free limit you're allowed. Till quite recently, it was 2,000, and I think it was the last budget. It was raised to £5,000, where an employer can claim the first £5,000 of their national insurance contributions free.
Yeah.
Um, and that was, or still is, I should say, based on whether your contributions in the last tax year were below £100,000. But this national insurance change actually has the capability to put a few employers back in that mix, doesn't it?
It does, which at times when everybody's struggling financially, individuals and employers, I think is a good thing to take note of.
Yes,
Certainly
indeed.
worth checking.
Indeed. And as somebody who runs a recruitment agency, I ought to point out to any employers that use them, check your charge rates from the 6th of November, because if your supplier as an employment agency is paying less on national insurance, kind of hoping they're adjusting your charge rate. So watch out for that one and make sure it's reflected in there. It's not a big change, but it should be there.
I think there's a win also, isn't there, on if the thresholds, we're assuming that the thresholds have stayed the same, but the changes to national insurance are likely to be a benefit to those that earn under 30,000, isn't it?
They are, and I mean, there's lots in the media about this at the moment, saying who the budget benefited or who the not a budget benefited. But the thresholds are an interesting thing because for those of you that follow this, you'll know we had the national insurance increase, which came in April of this year, and there was a big fuss about it affecting the lowest earners disproportionately. And Rishi Sunak, when he was Chancellor, seems a long time ago now, but when he was Chancellor, made a change by upping the thresholds which meant the lowest earners wouldn't pay any national insurance. And I don't have the exact figure in front of me, below around £11,000 a year income, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Somewhere around the tax threshold level. And I haven't seen anything to suggest the thresholds have been reversed. So what that means is not only is the NI contribution reduced by 1.25%, but the thresholds have remained at the higher level, I believe, which will make, again, quite a difference to those lowest earners. So
This is just COVID revisited, isn't it? Oh, look, we're going to make major changes, but we're not actually going to give you the detail just quite yet.
There's so much here we don't know. And, in 10 minutes, and we've got about 4 left, Kimberly. I mean, the other thing I want to pick up on, I'm going to try and do it at record pace, is the removal of EU laws, because that was the other part of Friday from an employment perspective. There's talk of a bill, and I kind of have to look at my notes to get this right. It's going to be the introduction of a retained EU law bill. And what that will do, as I understand it, is name employment regulations and laws that will remain and can be adjusted. And if the regulation, the EU employment regulation, isn't named within that bill, my understanding is that EU regulation will automatically expire at the end of December next year. Now, that's quite rapid in legal changes.
Absolutely. I mean, as you know, we and our viewers know as well, we have regular employment law changes on an ongoing basis every year anyway, which is why we need to update things like handbooks and contracts.
Indeed.
But, this is probably the biggest thing in employment law.
Well, the trouble is at the moment, this is just over 12 months away. We don't know what's going to be in it and what the changes are, but the things to watch out for, as far as I'm concerned, are the working time regulations, which could affect hours people work, rest breaks, could affect holiday entitlement. There's a huge amount in the working time regulations, but we expect that to be in the mix for changes. We think TUPE could be in the mix for changes. There's suggestions about fixed-term worker contract regulation that could be in there.
And part-time.
The one that really has my interest, I have to say, is the agency worker regulations. We don't know what will happen to these things, but we think they will be amended, relaxed, or repealed. And we have to plan for it on the basis and I'm going to do something really controversial here. We have to plan for it on the basis it might happen by December next year.
Yes, but quite what and when?
Well, there's a huge risk here. For those of you who've been watching the sterling markets over the past week, the big question is, how long will the government remain in place? And will they actually survive long enough for this to happen? And even if they do, they might do something miraculous and regain confidence. I'm not judging or making a political statement, but even if they do, can they win the next general election? And if not, if this is 31st of December 23, if we have an incoming government, and it now looks quite possible, if not likely, that incoming government might be Labour, will all these changes then be repealed?
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, there's never a dull moment.
No, and I think as an employer trying to plan for these, you have to almost plan for huge change rather than any certainty over what might happen, is my feeling of what we're looking at.
Yeah, I know. I bet the TU...
You sound so excited.
Pardon?
They said you sound so excited.
Well, it's because it keeps us on our toes. That's one of the positives about the COVID crisis was that we were on our toes the whole time. Absolutely.
Quickly, just try and sneak in one more that I think is really significant before we run out of time.
IR35.
Absolutely. What's happening with IR35?
Well, they've repealed all the changes that were made in 2017 and last year. so that instead of employers being responsible for compliance, it's the contractors themselves, which
Indeed.
I think is a big plus.
Hmm. I mean, it was quite a burden on employers to go through a range of checks to ensure a contractor was doing the appropriate thing and the end user carrying responsibility for it. And as you say, that is being moved entirely back onto the onus being on the individual by simply repealing the 2017 and 2021 regulations. So that's another biggie to watch out for if you use contractors. But as ever, we only have 10 minutes and we've run out of time, Kimberly.
Not again.
So for now, thank you very much. We won't be here next week as I will be at the Recruitment Expo conference in Birmingham next week, but we will be back in 2 weeks' time for another fascinating update of what's going on in the HR world.
Look forward to it. Bye bye. See you soon.